The courtroom became completely silent the moment Karen Beltridge shouted the words that would destroy her entire life. "I don't owe anyone respect." Not to her elderly neighbor, not to the courtroom, not even to Judge Judy. At first, the case looked simple: a neighborhood dispute, a damaged garden, a disagreement between neighbors. But within minutes, Judge Judy realized she wasn't dealing with a misunderstanding. She was dealing with pure entitlement. And by the end of the hearing, millions of viewers across America would witness one of the most brutal courtroom takedowns in Judge Judy history. Before we get into this unbelievable case, subscribe for more emotional courtroom stories, shocking Judge Judy moments, and real-life cases where actions finally meet consequences. Now let's begin. It was a Tuesday afternoon in Manhattan, and Judge Judy's courtroom was packed with spectators waiting to witness another day of small claims drama. Most people expected routine arguments over money, damaged property, or unpaid loans. Nobody expected to witness a moment that would later go viral across the entire internet. The plaintiff entered first. 72-year-old Harold Collingwood walked slowly toward the plaintiff's table, carrying a folder of photographs carefully pressed against his chest. He was dressed neatly in a clean button-up shirt and polished shoes, quiet, respectful, dignified. The kind of man who looked like he spent his whole life trying to stay out of trouble. And in many ways, Harold was a Vietnam veteran. After returning home from war, he worked for the postal service for 37 years before retiring peacefully in the same neighborhood where he had lived for over 4 decades. His garden became his pride and joy after retirement. Every morning, he watered his tomato plants before sunrise. He spent hours caring for his roses. Neighbors often stopped to compliment the beautiful herbs and flowers growing along the fence. To Harold, the garden wasn't just landscaping. It was peace, purpose, healing, especially after losing his wife 5 years earlier. Then Karen Beltridge entered the courtroom, and immediately the energy shifted. She shuffled inside wearing stained gray yoga pants, flip-flops, and an oversized purple t-shirt with faded writing barely visible across the front. Her hair was tied into a messy bun. One hand dug through an oversized purse while the other dragged a half-empty coffee cup. She didn't look at Judge Judy, didn't acknowledge Harold, didn't even seem aware she was standing inside a courtroom. Instead, she carried herself like someone forced to deal with an annoying inconvenience. Judge Judy noticed it instantly: the disrespect, the attitude, the complete lack of seriousness. And after decades on the bench, Judge Judy had learned something important. People who enter court without respect usually leave with consequences. The case officially began. Judge Judy calmly explained that Harold was suing Karen for $4,500 after she allegedly destroyed his garden. Karen rolled her eyes immediately. "This whole thing is ridiculous," she muttered loudly. Then she pointed toward Harold and said, "His stupid plants were growing near my yard anyway." The courtroom reacted instantly. Several people gasped. Judge Judy slowly removed her glasses. "Excuse me," she asked sharply. Karen shrugged carelessly. "Yeah, they were ugly." Harold lowered his eyes toward the floor. The hurt on his face was impossible to ignore. Judge Judy then held up photographs of Harold's garden before the destruction. Beautiful tomato plants, blooming roses, rows of carefully maintained herbs. A peaceful backyard built with years of patience and care. But Karen barely looked at the photos. "So what?" she said dismissively. "They attracted bees near my property." Judge Judy leaned forward. "You destroyed a man's 40-year garden because of bees." Karen crossed her arms. "I'm allergic." "Did you speak to him first?" Judge Judy asked. Karen laughed bitterly. "Why would I? He's just some old guy who plays in dirt all day." The courtroom became tense, very tense, because this wasn't about plants anymore. This was about cruelty, about a woman openly mocking an elderly veteran who had done nothing to her except grow flowers. Judge Judy's patience was beginning to disappear. Then things got even worse. Karen started complaining about Harold's wind chimes, his parking habits, the way he supposedly looked at her. Every excuse sounded more ridiculous than the last. Finally, Judge Judy ordered the court to play security camera footage from the morning of the incident. The monitors turned on, and the entire courtroom watched Karen destroy Harold's garden in real time. The footage showed Karen marching aggressively into the yard, carrying garden shears and a rake. Without hesitation, she began cutting through tomato plants one after another. Large red tomatoes crashed onto the dirt, branches snapped, flowers ripped apart. Then came the roses, beautiful bushes Harold had spent years growing. Karen hacked through them violently while yelling, "I'm sick of looking at this garbage." People in the courtroom watched in stunned silence. Then the footage captured Harold stepping outside wearing slippers and a bathrobe, confused, heartbroken, begging her to stop. "Please," Harold pleaded softly. "That garden means a lot to me." Karen didn't stop. Instead, she turned toward him and screamed, "I don't care, old man." Then came the sentence that changed everything. "Respect!" Karen shouted angrily. "I don't owe anyone respect." The courtroom froze. Even Judge Judy looked stunned. The footage continued showing Karen trampling through the herb garden, while Harold stood helplessly watching years of work destroyed in minutes. Then the video ended. Dommel's silence filled the courtroom. Judge Judy stood motionless for several seconds. Her face showed something rare, genuine anger, not irritation, not annoyance. Real anger. Finally, she looked directly at Karen. "You said on camera that you don't owe anyone respect." Karen shrugged. "Because I don't." The audience reacted again. Judge Judy's voice came cold. "Basic human decency is not optional in civilized society, Ms. Beltridge," but Karen refused to back down. She claimed everyone always sided with old people, claimed nobody cared about her problems, claimed Harold judged her. Judge Judy dismantled every excuse one by one. "You destroyed beauty because it annoyed you," Judge Judy said sharply. "You saw another person's happiness as an attack on your comfort." For the first time all hearing, Karen began crying. But they weren't tears of guilt. They were angry tears, humiliated tears. She still refused to apologize. So Judge Judy gave her one final opportunity. "Apologize to Mr. Collingwood," Judge Judy ordered. Karen crossed her arms stubbornly. "No." The courtroom gasped again. Judge Judy leaned forward. "Then the judgment increases." Karen froze. Finally, defeated and humiliated, she turned toward Harold, barely able to speak. "Mr. Collingwood, I'm sorry I destroyed your garden." Harold nodded quietly. "Thank you," he said softly. That simple response somehow hit harder than anything else said in court that day. Judge Judy then delivered the final verdict: $4,500 in damages, mandatory community service at a senior center, and one unforgettable lecture about respect, entitlement, and consequences. "You think respect must be earned," Judge Judy told Karen. "But basic decency is the minimum requirement for living among other people." Then she added the line that later spread across social media everywhere: "Respect costs nothing, but disrespect can cost you everything." The courtroom erupted into applause after the case ended, and within hours, clips from the hearing exploded online. Millions watched Karen's downfall. Her employer reportedly fired her 3 days later after recognizing her from the viral footage. She deleted all her social media accounts after receiving massive backlash. Eventually, she moved out of state entirely. Meanwhile, Harold's neighbors came together to rebuild his garden. More than 20 people volunteered. Local nurseries donated flowers, herbs, and supplies. And 6 months later, Harold Collingwood won Community Garden of the Year. Because sometimes justice isn't just about punishment. Sometimes it's about reminding people that kindness, dignity, and respect still matter in this world.